Rain pounded the Chicago sidewalk, soaking Sarah Mitchell's coat as she hurried through the neon-lit downtown. Her phone buzzed with hospital emails, but a rough voice stopped her cold. "Please, lady, just $1 for food." She spun around, her green eyes sharp with annoyance. A man in a filthy jacket huddled under a sagging awning, his bearded face wet, his blue eyes oddly bright. His shaky hand held a soggy sign, "Hungry, help me." "I don't carry cash," Sarah snapped, turning away. "Try working." Her words were harsh, spit out in a rush of stress. Guilt stung her, but she kept walking, the hospital's deadline screaming in her head. The man stood, his voice no longer weak but firm. "You'll wish you stopped, Sarah." She froze, heart racing. How did he know her name? She turned back, rain blurring her vision. He wasn't slouching anymore, he stood tall, staring right at her. "Who are you?" she demanded, fear creeping in. "You'll find out soon," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. Sarah Mitchell hurried through the halls of St. Luke's Hospital, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. At 30, she was a skilled nurse, her green eyes tired from long shifts, her blonde hair tied in a messy ponytail that swung as she moved. She carried a stack of patient charts, her mind racing with tasks: check vitals, update records, call families. It was another hectic day in Chicago, and Sarah was the glue holding her unit together. She loved her job, helping people when they needed it most. It was a calling she'd felt since she was a kid, watching her mom, a nurse, care for sick neighbors in their rough neighborhood. Her mom had been her hero, working long hours to keep them fed, teaching Sarah to be strong and kind. But St. Luke's was in bad shape. The hospital didn't have enough nurses, and the ones they had were burned out. Machines broke down, supplies ran low, and rumors of closure hung over everyone like a dark cloud. Sarah saw it in the worried faces of her coworkers and the fear in her patients' eyes. She wanted to fix it, to make sure no one was turned away, but she was only one person. Her shifts stretched to 12 or 14 hours, sometimes longer, leaving her exhausted. Her kindness, once endless, was now saved for her patients. Outside the hospital, she barely had energy to smile, let alone help strangers. 3 months ago, things got worse. The hospital's director called a staff meeting, his voice heavy. "We're out of money," he said. "If we don't get a big grant soon, St. Luke's might shut down." Sarah's stomach dropped. Losing the hospital would mean losing her purpose, her home. Her boss, nurse manager Linda, piled more work on her, asking her to help write the grant proposal. "You're good with words, Sarah," Linda said. "We need you." Sarah nodded, but inside, she felt overwhelmed. She wasn't a writer, and the extra work meant less sleep, less time to breathe. Sarah's days became a blur. She rushed from patient rooms to meetings, her phone buzzing with emails about budgets and deadlines. She ate lunch standing up, scarfing down a sandwich between tasks. At night, she fell into bed, her small apartment quiet except for the hum of the city outside. She dreamed of charts and patience, waking up tired but ready to fight another day. Her mom's words echoed in her head. "You're tougher than this, Sarah. Keep going." She held on to that, pushing through the stress, but it was wearing her down. Meanwhile, a man watched her from the shadows. His name was James Thornton, 35, a billionaire who owned Thornton Industries, a huge company that made tech and gave money to charities. James had blue eyes and a strong jaw, but no one would know it now. He hid his looks under a fake beard and grimy clothes, pretending to be a homeless man. He was tired of people chasing his money, fake friends who only cared about his wealth. A few years ago, he'd left his fancy life behind, disappearing from the news to live on the streets. He wanted to find real people, ones who were kind without expecting anything back. James had a plan. He tested strangers by asking for help, $1, a sandwich, a kind word. Most ignored him, some were mean, but a few showed heart. St. Luke's was special to him. He'd secretly given them money years ago, wanting to help without being noticed. Now, he stood outside the hospital, holding a cardboard sign that said "Hungry, help me." He watched the staff, the patients, the visitors, looking for someone worth trusting. Sarah caught his eye. She was always rushing, her face focused, but he saw how she calmed scared patients, how she stayed late to help. He wondered if her kindness went beyond her job, if she'd see him as a person, not just a problem. James started showing up on Sarah's route to work. Every morning, she walked the same path through Chicago's downtown, her coat pulled tight against the cold. The city was loud, horns honking, people shouting, and Sarah kept her head down, focused on getting to the hospital. James stood on a busy corner, his sign in hand, blending in with other homeless people. He called out to her a few times, his voice soft. "Spare some change." She barely looked at him, muttering, "Sorry," or shaking her head as she hurried past. She didn't mean to be cold, but her mind was full, patients, grants, the hospital's future. She didn't have time to stop, didn't have cash to give. To her, he was just another face in the crowd, one of many she passed every day. James wasn't discouraged. He saw the stress in Sarah's eyes, the way her shoulders slumped when she thought no one was looking. She wasn't cruel, just stretched too thin. He kept testing her, asking for help day after day, waiting to see if she'd pause, if she'd care. He didn't want her money, he wanted her heart. If she showed kindness, he'd know she was someone he could trust, maybe even someone who could help him save St. Luke's. But if she kept ignoring him, he'd have to look elsewhere. Sarah didn't know she was being watched. To her, the homeless man was a blur, one of many voices asking for something she couldn't give. She felt bad sometimes, her mom's lessons about helping others nagging at her, but she pushed it away. She had to save the hospital first. Her patients needed her, and that was all she could handle. Every day, she walked faster, her focus narrowing, her world shrinking to the hospital's walls. James stood on his corner, rain or shine, his blue eyes tracking her. He wasn't just testing Sarah, he was learning about himself, about what mattered. He'd given away millions, but kindness was harder to find. Sarah was his challenge, a woman who cared deeply but seemed blind to the world outside her work. He wondered if she could change, if she could see him. And if she did, what would that mean for them both? As winter tightened its grip on Chicago, Sarah's stress grew. The grant deadline was closing in, and the hospital's future hung in the balance. She didn't know it, but her next encounter with James would be the one that changed everything. She was a nurse fighting to save lives, but he was a billionaire fighting to find truth, and their paths were about to collide in a way neither could predict. Rain fell in sheets over Chicago, turning the sidewalks slick and gray. Sarah Mitchell hurried through the downtown bustle, her coat soaked, her green eyes fixed on the ground. Her phone buzzed with hospital emails, each one a reminder of the grant proposal that could save St. Luke's. At 30, Sarah was a nurse stretched to her limit, her blonde ponytail swinging as she dodged puddles. She'd always loved helping people, a lesson from her mom, but the hospital's troubles. Low funds, not enough staff, were wearing her down. Her kindness, once endless, was now reserved for patients. Everyone else got a quick sorry or nothing at all. James Thornton stood under a sagging awning, his tattered jacket dripping. At 35, he was a billionaire, the secret owner of Thornton Industries, but no one would guess it. His blue eyes, sharp despite the fake beard and grime, watched Sarah approach. He'd left his wealthy life behind, tired of fake friends chasing his money. Now, he posed as a homeless man, testing people's hearts. St. Luke's, a hospital he'd quietly funded, was his focus, and Sarah was his test. Her care for patients impressed him, but her rushed, cold responses to his pleas made him curious. Could she be kind outside her job? Sarah's life was a pressure cooker. The hospital's grant deadline was 2 weeks away, and her boss, nurse manager Linda, leaned on her hard. "You're our best shot, Sarah," Linda said, handing her a stack of budget reports. Sarah wasn't a writer, but she took the work, staying up late to draft the proposal. Her shifts were endless, checking vitals, comforting families, fixing mix-ups. She ate on the go, slept too little, and snapped at coworkers when stress boiled over. Her mom's voice, "You're tougher than this," kept her going, but she felt like she was cracking. James had been on her route for weeks, holding a soggy sign, "Hungry, help me." Every morning, Sarah passed his corner, her coat tight against the cold, her mind on work. He'd call out, "Spare $1." She'd shake her head, muttering, "Sorry," or just keep walking. She didn't mean to be rude, she didn't have cash, didn't have time. The city was full of people asking for help, and Sarah told herself she was doing enough by saving lives at the hospital. But guilt flickered sometimes, a quiet nag she ignored. James wasn't like other homeless people. He didn't need her money. He needed her truth. He'd tested dozens of strangers, asking for small things to see who cared. Some gave coins, others kind words, but most rushed by. Sarah was different, she wasn't cruel, just distracted. He saw her exhaustion, the way her hands shook when she thought no one was looking. He kept asking for help, day after day, waiting for a spark of kindness. If she showed it, he'd know she was someone he could trust with St. Luke's future. If not, he'd move on. Sarah's stress hit a peak that week. The grant proposal wasn't good enough, and Linda kept sending it back. "More details," she'd say, her voice sharp. Sarah spent her breaks typing, her lunch uneaten, her head pounding. Patients needed her too, a kid with a fever, an old man scared of surgery. She stayed late, missing dinners, her apartment a place to crash, not live. She felt alone, like the hospital's fate rested on her shoulders. Her kindness was slipping, and she didn't even notice. James saw it all. He stood on his corner, rain or shine, his blue eyes tracking her. He'd ask for change, and she'd brush him off, her steps faster each day. He wasn't mad, he understood pressure. He'd built $1 billion company, faced boardrooms and betrayals, but he'd never felt as trapped as Sarah looked. He wondered what it would take to make her stop, to make her see him. He decided to push harder, to test her one last time. That rainy evening, Sarah was at her limit. An email from Linda, "Revise the grant by tomorrow," had her stomach in knots. She left the hospital late, the city dark and wet. James was there, under his awning, his sign sagging. "Just $1, please," he called, his voice soft but clear. Sarah stopped, her patience gone. "Try working," she snapped, her voice louder than she meant. The words felt wrong as soon as they left her mouth, like a slap she couldn't take back. Guilt hit hard, but she was too tired, too scared about the hospital. She kept walking, her sneakers splashing in puddles, telling herself she didn't have time to care. James watched her go, his jaw tight. He'd seen her stress, her fear, but this was different, her words were cold, final. She wasn't heartless, but she was blind to the world outside her work. He'd been testing her for weeks, and this was the moment he'd been waiting for. Sarah had failed, but he wasn't ready to give up on her. She cared deeply for her patients. Maybe she could care for others too, if given a chance. Under the awning, James stood straighter, his blue eyes sharp. He'd show her who he was, not as a beggar, but as the man who could save St. Luke's. He'd give her one more test, one last shot to prove her kindness. The rain kept falling, but James felt a spark of purpose. Sarah didn't know it yet, but their next meeting would change everything. Sarah reached the hospital, her coat dripping, her mind on the grant. She felt bad about the man, but pushed it away. She had to focus, patience, deadlines, survival. The city's hum faded as she stepped inside, the fluorescent lights harsh. She didn't see James slip into the shadows, his sign left behind. He was done pretending, at least with her. Tomorrow, he'd face her as himself, and she'd have to decide who she really was. Her heart pounding as the man's words echoed in her ears, "You'll wish you stopped, Sarah." Rain blurred her vision, but his figure was clear now, tall, no longer slouched, his blue eyes sharp under the dripping hood of his tattered jacket. Her green eyes widened, her blonde ponytail plastered to her neck. She gripped her phone, its screen glowing with hospital emails, but all she could think was, "How does he know my name?" "Who are you?" she asked again, her voice shaky. The city roared around them, horns, footsteps, the hiss of rain, but his stare held her like a spotlight. He stepped closer, rain streaming down his bearded face. "I've been watching you, Sarah Mitchell, nurse at St. Luke's," he said, his voice steady, not weak like before. "You save lives, but you walk past people like me every day. Why?" Her stomach twisted. Was he a stalker? Someone from the hospital? She took a step back, her sneakers slipping on the wet pavement. "Stay away," she warned, fumbling with her phone, ready to call for help. He raised a hand, calm but firm. "I'm James Thornton," he said. "I could save your hospital, but I needed to see if you're kind." "You didn't pass, Sarah." Her breath caught. James Thornton. The billionaire who'd vanished years ago, the one who'd supposedly funded hospitals like St. Luke's. Her mind raced, flashing to his pleas for $1, her sharp reply, "Try working." She'd ignored him, brushed him off for weeks. "You're not homeless," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm not," he said, his blue eyes piercing. "I test people. Kindness matters more than money. You failed, but I'm giving you one more chance." Before she could speak, a black car pulled up, its headlights cutting through the storm. A driver in a suit leaned out. "Mr. Thornton, we need to move." Sarah's jaw dropped. The driver knew him, called him by name. This was real. James opened the car door, pausing to look at her. "Tomorrow, St. Luke's boardroom," he said. "Show me who you really are." He climbed in, and the car sped off, leaving Sarah alone in the rain, her mind spinning. She stood there, water dripping from her coat, trying to make sense of it. James Thornton, a billionaire, had been pretending to be homeless, testing her. She thought of St. Luke's, its crumbling budget, the patients who'd suffer if it closed. He'd said he could save it, but why her? Why this test? Guilt crashed over her, heavy as the rain. She'd been cold, not just to him, but to others, too focused on her job to care. Sarah started walking, her sneakers splashing in puddles. The hospital was a few blocks away, but it felt farther now, like everything had shifted. She'd always seen herself as kind, a nurse who helped people, just like her mom taught her. Her mom had worked long hours, cared for neighbors, never turned anyone away. But Sarah had changed. The hospital's troubles, low funds, not enough staff, had made her hard. She saved her energy for patients, shutting out the world outside. James had been on her route for weeks, his cardboard sign a blur she barely noticed. She'd passed him every morning, rushing to work, her mind on charts and deadlines. He'd ask for change, and she'd mumble, "Sorry," or keep walking, telling herself she didn't have time, didn't have cash. She hadn't meant to be mean, but stress had made her blind. Now, she saw his face clearly, those blue eyes, that steady voice. He wasn't just a beggar. He was someone who could change her life, or end her career. Sarah reached St. Luke's, the fluorescent lights harsh after the dark street. The lobby was quiet, the night shift moving like ghosts. She checked her phone, another email from her boss, Linda, about the grant proposal. Sarah was supposed to help write it, a last shot to save the hospital. She felt sick, thinking of James's words, "Show me who you really are." What did he want? An apology? Proof she wasn't cold. She didn't know, but the idea of facing him tomorrow, in front of the hospital board, made her stomach churn. She thought back to the past few months. St. Luke's had been her home for years, a place where she felt needed. She'd chosen nursing because of her mom, who'd shown her how to care, how to fight for people. But the hospital's troubles had changed her. She worked 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer, juggling patients and paperwork. Linda's extra tasks, like the grant, piled on more pressure. Sarah barely ate, barely slept, her apartment a place to crash, not live. She'd started snapping at coworkers, ignoring strangers, losing the part of herself that used to care about everyone. James had seen it all. He'd stood on his corner, watching her rush by, testing her day after day. Sarah didn't know why he'd picked her, but his words stuck: kindness matters more than money. She'd failed his test, but he was giving her another chance. Why? Was it a trick, or did he see something in her she'd forgotten? She felt a flicker of hope, mixed with fear. If he really was Thornton, he could save St. Luke's. But if she failed again, she might lose